Welcome to the Anchor Premier Podcast, where we aim to translate real estate into reality. We hope to educate and entertain and invite you into the conversation. Myself, Brian Cohen, and my co-hosts, Elliot McWhorter and Johnny Dugan. If you have a comment or an idea for a topic or interview, please leave it below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so that when new episodes come out, you're the first to know. Now let's get to it. Alright, so we're talking about the crash.
When's it going to happen, Brian?
The inevitable, it has
to happen. It's going to blow.
No questions asked.
Top's got to blow.
Well, I don't know if y'all have run into this recently, but I've had plenty of people say, I'm not going to buy. I'm just going to wait till it crashes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, okay. So it's like, and I've noticed that's like kind of prevailing wisdom when it comes to the stock market as well.
Right.
Like, oh, I'm not buying high, which, understandably.
Right.
Because it's going to go down.
Right.
Real estate, how's that prevailing wisdom hit us?
Right.
So
that's our job to figure it out. You know?
Yeah.
We want to try to figure out if there was a bust. I went through the bust.
Yeah.
In 2008, lost my pants, didn't find my pants again until 2018. And so I'm scared of a bubble. I'm trying to find reasons to be fearful of the bubble.
Sure.
Inflation, crazy. Mm-hmm. We know it. That should pump the brakes. It needs to pump the brakes because we can't go on at 20% per year. None of us will have houses.
Sure.
And so... article, Tampa went up, and that's my old stomping grounds, 32%. I mean, things do need to slow down.
Sure.
But as far as popping, that's a whole different topic.
Because we want to have, look from an economic perspective, you want a reasonable amount of growth,
right,
at a reasonable amount of inflation yearly, because it keeps things kind of like on an uptick versus things just going wild, and then you get substantial dynamic changes in your curves.
Right.
So take us a little bit through your experience in the last crash and the things that you saw last time,
right,
and the stuff that you're this time completely different.
Right. The biggest thing that happened last time was the market was hot like it is now. However, the difference was building was happening at an all-time rate. So builders could build super fast. They could get money super cheap and super easy.
Yep.
And so they overbuilt. Everybody got excited. They built a bunch of houses because they could get so much money for them.
Yep.
And then the mortgage market turned, and then following that was just a overwhelmingly high inventory.
Yeah.
And so what drove the prices down was now there's tons of homes available. The biggest difference now is we have the prices going up, but we don't have the inventory on the backside. So until there's enough homes that the 20 people that want to move, until there's 20 houses available, those 20 people are still going to fight over the 10 houses that are available, and therefore prices will continue to go up.
Yeah.
So it's an inventory and a building control problem.
Yeah.
Interest rates should pump the brakes on demand and competition.
Yeah.
But it won't fundamentally change the value of your home.
Yeah. And I want to come back to how the interest rates are going to impact us, because I think it's a great perspective thing, and then we also have the jumbo loan conversation to talk about. But what I hear you saying is that the last time it crashed, there was a increase in prices just because people could get money, and there was plenty of houses, and you could essentially charge what you wanted. And now its prices are chasing demand because the supply is so suppressed.
Right.
So that gives us a reason to say this is actually a build, and this is not a bubble.
Fundamentally it's a supply and demand issue now versus money was too easy to get before.
Yeah.
So there was
growth on both sides.
Yeah. The builders and the buyers could both get money very easily.
Yep.
now interest rates still are low, and that's part of what drove prices this time.
Yeah.
But you still have to qualify for mortgages.
Sure.
Before, you practically didn't have to qualify for a mortgage.
Or you could have 5 and
Or you could have 5
with no income verification,
right.
like 2% down.
Right. So
nothing.
builders built a bunch of people that couldn't afford could just borrow on no real finances.
Yep.
And that was a huge combining factor into the bubble from 2008.
Yeah.
And the fundamental economics behind this increase in price, it's part COVID driven because that slowed building down.
Mm-hmm.
The interest rates dropping brought demand back up, but the building has not been able to ramp back up at the same pace.
Yeah. Especially considering what we have, the supply chain issues.
Right.
There's labor issues.
Mm-hmm.
What else is there? I mean, just the fuel prices are through the roof. So
Well,
just getting stuff.
like we said before, the builders have to borrow money too.
Yeah.
And so their interest rates are higher. So
Yep.
they're also pumping the brakes on the speed at which or the amount of materials they build at any one
And
time.
a lot of most of the builders that I know that survived because they sold all of their personal assets and essentially took a massive personal hit
Right.
to keep their business alive. And most of them had the essential sentiment of that will never happen to me, even if it means I build 3 houses and not 30.
Right.
I will build 3 houses and be profitable and sustainable on those 3, then try to get over my skis again.
Right.
And
Exactly.
end up losing everything that I worked for.
Right.
So, and I didn't know this until recently, but home building is actually the only industry in America that is still primarily small business. Like
that's a great point.
Large builders,
Right.
they're prevalent. The
Right.
D.R. Hortons, the Pulte's, the whoever else.
Yeah.
But as a general rule, the vast majority of home builders are small. They're like some guy and whoever works for him building houses.
Right. Well, Elliot probably sees this the most. We concentrate on new construction because it is our relief right now because of inventory. Elliot probably sees it the most. A great indicator, and you can talk about the availability of new construction.
Sure.
But a good indicator to us is what's the availability of a new construction house.
Good luck.
Right. How long does it take to get into a new construction
I mean,
house?
it really depends on the builder, but I mean, for example, with the Toll Brothers, we're seeing 16 to 18 months out on a build. They do have some inventory homes. I mean, but they're building way out. Some of the other builders, Taylor Morrison, they're kind of building up till about 2 or 3 months out, and they're building it spec too. You don't get your custom home; they're building it spec, and then you can purchase the home, and you have to bid on it too. And and then you only have to wait 2 or 3 months before it's done.
Yeah.
But each builder is kind of taking a different approach to it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely they're definitely playing catch up right now.
But the common theme is they're not building houses. They've got 5, for lack of a better term, on the lot, ready to go.
Yeah.
They're sold way in advance.
Yeah, these houses, the lots are being sold before the community's even built.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
they don't even have roads down, and they've already got maybe a third of the lots sold.
So until we see new construction homes sitting, we still have an inventory problem.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of our key metrics that we follow. So it's inventory, which is still, even with the way interest rates are going, it's still all-time low inventory as far as available homes for all the prospective buyers. Days on market is still extremely short, which means there's still 5 buyers for every home available. And so this whole conversation started on when's it going to crash. We have to build millions of homes, and that's going to take a lot of time. Not only because it just takes time to build homes, but it's harder and slower building homes. That's our indicator. Now, the key for us is to follow that trend and keep a close eye on inventory. However, the kind of design of our market, at least today, is to get to an equilibrium.
Yeah.
Interest rates should get us to where, we do have more than, 34 minutes to decide on buying a house.
Yeah.
We should have, 48 hours to figure it out.
Yep.
And so the system and the interest rates going up,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not all for interest rates, but our economy can't sustain 20% per year on real estate.
Yeah,
So
no.
we need that. I'm also a proponent for builders building more homes so that people can get in and can afford them.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. There's no affordable homes.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
the other thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to get into an affordable home, that's even harder.
Yeah.
Right.
All of that points to, is this thing going to pop and there's a bunch of homes? Now let me ask you about foreclosures. So I have people saying, all right, well, now COVID's over. There's a moratorium on foreclosures.
Yeah.
They're all going to hit the market kind of at one time.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
When we were talking about this the other day, it was one of those. It was the foreclosures were actually at a massively suppressed level because of COVID, because of the moratorium. So we should see them return to a normal level.
Right.
That being said, until they hit to a normal level, you really can't even make any sort of indication above. But if you have high demand and tons of buyers, I mean, there's tons of buyers.
Right.
A foreclosure, one, is going to sell quickly. It's
Right.
going to sell competitively,
Right.
and the bank's probably going to make money on it,
Right.
which in 2008 they were losing their tails. And then and people, when the interest rate goes up, and people that are kind of a little bit more flimsy on their financing, or they're not qualifying at 20% with a conventional, they don't have a really solid history, or they have one of those extra loan products, or just don't have cash, those people are gonna start falling out of the competition, and those any house is gonna go over. So I think that's actually the good thing about the interest rates, and that's why they're doing that. Is it is gonna slow that buyer pool, which is gonna slow essentially the feeding frenzy.
Right.
It should probably elongate that whole curve so that the building can catch up, so that people can start thinking outside of the box and not feel trapped in the house that they don't really want, but not be able to afford a house that they do want, or say, there's no point moving, I'll pay more for this house, kind of deal.
And this is kind of off the cuff, but it's kind of a misconception that we as realtors love the frenzy.
Yeah.
And we don't. In fact, we're promoters of equilibrium. We work a lot harder in this frenzy, even on the buyer or seller side, because it's so chaotic. These are big deals that are happening, and we don't have time to think them through. People are buying. People are overspending. They're overstretching. We feel uncomfortable with the offers we're giving and receiving.
They're buying things that are sight unseen, 20 years old.
Right.
You have absolutely no idea, but that's the only way to get something.
Right.
When you look at what was it that David was saying, that 30% of the people that bought in the last 6 months regret it, or regretted it within 6 months.
Right.
So I wish I'd never done that, or whatever. And I think there's probably a behavioral component there of saying not just is it a good time to buy or sell, but what's the reason? And that's kind of what we've been talking about, taking that consultative approach. What's the reason? What's the motivation? What's the goal? How do we help you achieve that? Because that gives us a better framework for how to solve for that, versus it just be want house, buy house, sell house.
Right.
Which is because that's super robotic, versus I want to achieve this goal. How do I help you achieve that goal? Because then that's when we start bringing in the different products, the different approaches, the different sales techniques versus for a sale, or the way to buy and sell at the same time, and do it with the strongest profile possible.
Right. Because now it's the chaos in the bidding process. Some of it's not real. And we don't think there's going to be a pop or a crash. We are, however, in favor of an equilibrium, but we still don't think that's going to happen for. What do you think? How long do you think before things get to a 2015 type year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like by the end of this summer, it's going to be a great time to really say, like, hey, what's the trajectory of the next year look like? I think there's also still a lot of pent up demand. People those people are either going to have to find something, or they're going to have to quit, or they're going to have to not be able to qualify anymore.
Yep.
Or they're going to have to change what they're looking for, which might mean, hey, I'm not looking in Sandy Springs, now I'm looking in Alpharetta. So now you're looking at a $900,000 house instead of a $1.9 million house, $1.9 million. So it changes. I think it changes. That changes like why you have those centralities of demand. So I think kind of just to answer your question, I think that we just kind of have to. I think we have to watch it unfold over how the interest rates happen, and how, because we're going into high buying season, how the high buying season compares to last year's and the year before, and then we'll get an idea of like the trajectory's still going to be high. It's just not going to be 30% in a month high, or it's going to be like it's going to start to flatten, and it's going to start to get where it's not a seller's market, it's not a buyer's market, it's the right deal for the right people market. And that ideally, in most cases, for at least for a consumer standpoint, that's the best case scenario. Equal fair value for a fair price, two people that are finding equal utility in the same item, which is a home. And so, present the best you can, both on what you're offering and what you're offering to buy for. And I think that puts us in a better place for the long haul.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where we want to get to.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, we're in a commission-based business. However, what we see is kind of destructive behavior, and it's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
And so we don't promote that.
Sure.
It's not going to benefit us, 2 years from now if we max somebody's offer out.
Right.
It doesn't help us.
Or put them into a foreclosure situation.
Yeah, right.
2 years from now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How long do you think we've been? I probably need to give us a break. It's been 30. I was thinking we're still stuck.
There you go.
I was still thinking we were still stuck on the 20-minute timer.
Right. I got you.
No. We're good. We're good.
Yeah. So, so we talked about interest rates. We talked about like the crash. The chances of it happening are super minute, and we just see kind of less craziness. What do y'all think about like while the craziness, we're still navigating the craziness? Like, how do we put people, manage expectations, put people in the right framework, and kind of use like an outside of the box consultative approach to address these things, so it just doesn't become, let's go into 10 feeding frenzies and see if we survive one of them.
Right. It's preparation is key right now, and I would say part of that preparation is not overextending. And so if you feel like you're going to be part of a bidding war, and you're preparing for something like that, one, you have to have your ducks in a row with your financing, and all your loan should be, my opinion, you should be pre-underwritten before you even get into it in this market. But you have to manage your expectations when you're putting in bids. So you might, if you can afford a $300,000 house, you might actually be looking at houses that are listed at $275,000, kind of expecting to go a little high.
Yeah.
All that said, we're hoping that becomes that the listing and offerings kind of balance back out, because it's completely unpredictable how effectively the auctions go, and that's kind of how you feel right now.
Yeah.
And that's that also ends up being kind of an unfair
Yeah.
bidding process.
And it also kind of people I've seen. It seems like there becomes a talking out of both sides of your mouth, because people will say, "Oh, I want to buy, but just the prices are out of control." People, want ungodly amounts of money for their house, but then when they talk about selling, they're
Right.
like, "Oh no, I want as many offers as possible.
Sure.
I want them to be at each other's jugulars. I want
Right.
every penny I can get out of this
Right.
house because I deserve it."
Right.
And it's like the two. I understand both perspectives. But the
course.
two are completing.
So here,
are competing ideologies.
I'll tell you a story, and no names, no brokerages, but
Sure.
there was a seller. They listed with an agent at $299, and it was closer to town, and they got an offer the next day at $342. Okay, big appraisal gap, beautiful offer at $342.
Yeah.
The seller said, please go back to the buyer and re-offer $360. I want to up the ante again, and that's kind of taking advantage of the market. Now I know that agent kind of talked them down from that, but that's, to your point. There are sellers that go, I can't afford anything. I can't believe I'm in this position where I'm offering you this great offer and you won't accept it. But when I sell my house, I want to milk every tiny bit out of it.
Yeah, and I'm not doing anything.
Right, I'm not doing anything to it. And by the way, somebody gave me way more than I ever asked for.
Sure.
But once I saw their offer, I'd had to ask for more.
Yeah.
And that's
Well, I never know if I don't ask.
Right.
And it's like, well, it's just, it kind of does bring out some of the more disingenuous aspects
Right.
of human nature.
Right.
And I think part of, and it's good that we talk about it, because let's get it out there, because we had to deal with it. And I want to deal with it in a compassionate manner, but also a realistic manner, because we aren't just providing a transactional service, we're providing an advisory service.
Right.
And when we're advising, yes, you can sell your house without having to put 20 grand into it in most cases. That being said, if your house isn't in top dollar shape, don't expect absolute top dollar.
Mm-hmm.
You might get a little better than you ask. You might get a little better market, because there has been some growth since the last the last thing in your neighborhood sold. Maybe there's 10 people that want to live in your neighborhood. Something hadn't sold in 3 months, so those 9 people are going to be super competitive to try to get in, so their kids can go to start school in August or whatever. So I think you can definitely list at 5 and end up at 515, 520, or whatever it is.
Sure.
But to say this is going to be 60 people around the block, it's going to get wild.
Right.
Somebody from California is going to come pay me $1 million for a trailer.
Right.
It's let's go ahead and talk our way through realistically what this.
And truth is, it was that kind of mentality that created the last crash. It was greed. People got greedy, and because the money was available, other people went for it, and then it created this kind of bubble thing. And we've talked about it internally. We can't be a part of that the frenzy or that hives that beehive of conditions that says we're setting ourselves up for failure. This career is a long term. This is a long game type of career.
Sure.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Yep.
And that's kind of how we have to approach it.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, while people, it's funny we so nonchalantly talk about buying a house, but we would not nonchalantly talk about spending $500,000 in cash on anything else, on literally anything else.
Right.
If I told my wife, "Hey, I want a new house, $500,000," she'd probably be like, I was like, "Hey, I want a Lamborghini, $500,000." Like, are you lost your mind?
But it's worth it.
If you get the right Lamborghini, it actually goes up in value.
That's right.
Whole nother podcast. But and I think that's something that also we can put in perspective. This is a huge decision.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really hard conversation to have with somebody, and to tell them right now might not be the right time. But if we're doing what's best for them and what eventually will be best for us, because I don't want to be blamed for forcing somebody into something.
Mm-hmm.
it's going to come back. It's going to be better in the long run. Like, would you say, Elliot, about if something has to be forced? It's probably
yeah. If you got to work too hard to make it happen, maybe you should just wait.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I don't like trying to force anything.
Right.
If it's going to work, it should be fairly natural.
Sure. Relatively smooth, or
Right,
at least have
right.
checkpoints that you're like
Right.
positive, affirmative, positive.
Right.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to work a whole bunch of overtime to
Right.
get into that house that's got one extra bedroom.
Yeah.
Right.
Pump the brakes, get into something more comfortable.
Sure.
Don't force it.
Sure.
Right.
And
Yeah.
With all that said, though, I feel like the market is kind of taking a slight turn here as we're getting into the busy season.
Yeah.
It does seem to me like the whole feeding frenzy is slowing down a little bit.
Well, the interest rates should bring less
Right.
buyers.
Yeah. Right.
That's true.
And I have seen the resale inventory kind of starting to creep up a little bit
Right. And it
to
needs
meet
to.
that demand. Right.
Yeah.
Right. It has to.
Yeah.
So
Well, and more people are going to sell in spring.
Yep.
So that they can exchange in summer, so
Right.
the kids can be whatever, or kids are
Right.
graduating, and so it's a great it's a time of freed schedule. It's a time of sunshine. People want to. It's the same as buying a car.
Right.
You don't buy them on a rainy day. You
Right.
buy it on a beautiful Sunday where riding in a convertible
Right.
seems like the best thing ever.
Right.
we're talking about the Lamborghini.
Right. Still.
Correct.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just keep going back to it. Megan, if you're listening. But so I think that's a great point is we are seeing those things rise. The frenzy might not be as crazy, or at least not across the board. But let's talk about like the caveats to that. Price point. 200, 250, 300, 350. There's still a gargantuan pool of buyers for that.
Yeah.
Whether
Absolutely.
it's investors with cash, people coming from out of state with cash, new first time home buyers who have a great job and 20% down and they're ready to roll. People, or just the regular person who 10 years ago bought a house for $129,000 with 2 bedrooms and now has 17 kids, and they're like, oh my god.
So that's a great point when you
Yeah,
talk
this-
about
yeah.
market popping. So in theory, as the interest rates go up, the pool for buyers at the lower prices goes up, right? Because your monthly payment goes up, and assuming you're not getting raises at work that
are
commensurate
Yeah.
with interest rates. And so essentially, you might have been looking for a more expensive home 6 months ago, but now you have to look a little bit less, and so that's going to drive demand for those up even more
Right.
than they are
Right.
now.
Yeah.
And so again, it's going to take a lot of building and inventory release of some sort, either building or people moving or whatever, to get that demand back to something we would consider normal. And so when we talk about interest rates going up and demand going down, it's still way above normal. Like it's getting back towards normal. It's not crashing. It's not falling off the cliff.
Yeah.
It's getting back to normal. It's normalizing.
Sure.
And so
normalizing is a great word.
So in that regard, climbing interest rates, they're not hurting or they're not going to cause a crash or a downturn. It's flattening. Don't we get political? Flattening the curve a little bit here, and so we expect that, but that's where the market needs to go. So when people say, "I'm just going to wait for it to crash," you're going to be sitting a while.
Yeah. And chances are, I don't know. I was going to say, chances are you're probably not going to have any money by the time it crashes.
With the way that interest rates or inflation's going.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and on the interest rates conversation, I mean, if your inflation's at 7% and your interest rate's at 3%,
Right.
if you're sitting on cash, you're actually losing 3.5% for every year that goes by.
Right.
So I mean, that's kind of like why interest rates exist, because future value of money is a little different than present value of money.
Right.
So when we have inflation that's all over the place, your buying power now is actually substantially stronger than when everything goes 7%
Right.
higher, and your wage only
Sure.
like 2%,
Sure.
3% higher. So, that's kind of something to kind of keep in mind.
Right.
If I don't want to pressure people, but at the same time, if I wait, I might passively price my own self out of buying something that would be fantastic for me, as well as if we know that things are probably going to continue to rise until building catches up, which the estimate's like, 2 to 3 years?
Yeah.
Maybe 4. In 2 to 3 years, if everything continues to rise, you're going to get a definite return on what you bought now.
Right.
And then when things are a little more normalized, you'd probably be able to do a 1-for-1 trade for something better.
Right. Yeah.
So we've seen 20% growth. Most even pessimistic economists talk about real estate. They're still predicting 10 and 12% next year, which is still astronomical.
Yeah.
On the the grand economic scale.
Sure.
So to your point, if you're waiting, and granted, we want to be real clear here. We're not trying to push anybody into buying at any particular time. We're simply saying in this context, if you're waiting for the market to crash, most every expert, even pessimistic ones, agree that the market's still going to climb, prices are still going to climb, interest rates are going to climb, and in a year, the house you're looking at now will be more expensive.
Yep.
That's an economic approach, and maybe you want to wait until you can afford it, which I'm all on board. Maybe you want to pay off your debt first. Yep. I'm all on board. I'd rather you pay off your debt and then pay a little more for your house later.
Yep. That's a wise financial decision.
Sure, and I'm all about that.
Some perspective financial decision, and the inverse perspective financial decision is what got us into 2007, 2008.
Right.
Because people signed up to pay a $1,500 mortgage that they couldn't, but they're like, it's fine. All I have to do is pay interest for 5 years, and in 5 years I'll definitely be able to afford it.
Right.
Wrong.
Right.
And it was definitely wrong when you did that for 5 houses.
Right. And it was definitely wrong that the bank let you do that.
Yeah.
And that was the combining factors, that the qualifications for mortgages then were substantially lower than they are now.
Yeah.
I mean, we know the rigors now of the mortgage processes, and most mortgages, there's especially competitive, and I did those back in the day. The no loan, the no doc, stated income, a single sheet of paper. I just said, I make this much, I promise, and here's my credit score. And then they would run my credit. Luckily, I did have good credit, but I would just state how much I made. Here's my social security number so you can run my credit, and here's a copy of my driver's license. And they'd say, here you go buy your house. A single sheet of paper was it. Now, I took it, but in whether that was a mistake on my part, but the point is I could, and anybody like me could, and a lot of people did, and a lot of people that couldn't afford it did.
Yeah.
And so it's nothing like that now.
No.
You can't just walk in, pretend that you make something that you don't. It's all verified now.
Yeah.
And so my point there is the huge driving factor of the crash of 2008 was just gross negligent mortgage practices. And it's kind of sucked a lot of people in. So it's not all like, not everybody who had a foreclosure was greedy.
Yeah.
They said, hey, I like this house. And the bank said, I'll gladly give you a loan for that house. And they said, wonderful, thank you. That's gross negligence by the bank, and then you pile on a little greed on top of that.
Yeah.
But
or just you very honestly could afford it until there was a massive economic inflection and you lost your job. I mean, you can't. That's unavoidable.
Right.
That's a normal foreclosure in the midst of crisis.
But even that today is harder.
Yeah.
It's harder for foreclosures to happen because of the rigors of the mortgage rate, mortgage process now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so again, all of that is to say, it's just a different situation in 2008.
Yeah. Going back real quick to the increase in the housing market, with inflation where it's at, and you were talking about where people are putting their money and they could even be pricing themselves out of the market later. I mean, if we're predicting that the housing is going to increase over the next couple of years, what a great place to put your money. And also, how many other people are thinking the same thing? getting their money out of the U.S. dollar and putting in something that's a little bit more stable that can increase over time.
Yeah.
So I think that's also pushing
Yeah.
the increase in prices and in the housing market too.
You could even kind of say real estate's kind of the original crypto. I mean, it's a bit of a stretch.
I don't understand crypto anyway.
Well, I'm in crypto.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are probably putting their money into real estate. A lot of investors are putting their money into real estate because they don't trust where the dollar's going. They don't trust where the stock market's going. But the housing market is showing some real promise.
If you can pull 20% on a house in a year and your portfolio at max on max tilt doing 16, I mean, you'd be unwise to leave.
Well, follow the money. So we saw a stat in the fourth quarter of last year. I'm gonna get the number wrong, but to me, in my brain, it was astronomically high. It was like 40% of all closings were investors. That's a huge number that came from First MLS.
Really?
Yeah. And so I assume that number would be in the single digits, 10-12% of all closings would be investors. That is intuitive to me.
Sure.
But to see that high of a number, and that's another thing is, so if you're trying to say where are the good investments, not to say that all investors make wise investments, but when you see huge billions and billions of dollars being dumped into an industry like that, there's got to be something behind that.
Yeah. Yeah, a hedge fund's not dumping their money blindly.
Right.
They've got all the analytics.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And so if they see something trending, maybe they're pulling out of an index fund and dropping them into a real estate fund or whatever. But I was shocked to see that number. But that's it's a whole bunch more money that I didn't necessarily anticipate being dumped into the real estate market.
Yeah.
And it's further re-emphasizing or reinforcing the trajectory, if you will.
Yeah. That's an excellent point.
Maybe a good thing to point buyers to start thinking a little bit more like an investor. You know, you got a lot of buyers out there today where they're trying to be super picky. They want their dream home in this crazy market. Well, maybe let's reel it back in a little bit. Let's think more along the lines of what works for me now.
Yeah.
What's out there? What can I make work? You know, buy something a little cheaper. Put a little save a little bit of that cash. Put a little bit of it back into the house. And then when the market calms down in 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, take it back out. Then find your dream home.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but if you want to get into a house now, I mean, if it makes sense for you financially, I would say do it now. Don't wait. Don't get priced out.
Sure.
Jump in now if you can afford it.
Right.
If it makes sense for you.
Yeah.
And then put that money into that, and you know you can still make money off of a house. I mean, you're not going to lose.
So to your point, look at the real estate market as a stock. Pretend you're not moving in. You're trying to do the analytics on the real estate market as a stock option or as a stock. Would this be a good time to buy that stock or sell that stock or wait for that stock to crash? And that's really what we're talking about here. We're kind of effectively talking through the analytics of the market as a whole. And really when we talk about nationwide, then you get into where we are, Atlanta, North Georgia, white hot market. I mean, a lot of big cities are right now for sure. But then we take that same kind of approach, kind of investment approach into the analytics of where's the market going to go, and then we apply it to our more local market here, and we see, especially on North Atlanta, if North Atlanta were a stock, it might be hotter than a Kansas stock, and so we're analyzing that to that same degree that Elliot's talking about. If you look at it through that lens. And you talk about, should you buy the stock today or should you buy the stock in a year? I think if you just take the emotions of living in the house out of it, the analytics will say get it now, so long as you can afford it. No, we're never
Right.
going to pressure. We've
don't-
always
yeah.
wanted to make sense.
Don't stretch yourself.
Right.
Don't.
Yeah.
It's
No.
not worth it.
No.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's an excellent kind of perspective. It's like, is it like the bottom of the market where you're going to make 1,000%? No, but
Right.
do
That
we
was 2
see
years
it's
ago.
going to continue?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to continue to grow. So
Right.
it's a better probability that it's a wise use of your money that you're going to end up on top or at
Right.
least breaking even than something that we just expect all kinds of.
If for
Right.
nothing else, getting your money out of the dollar
Yeah.
to avoid inflation. I mean, if for nothing else,
Right.
you're avoiding inflation.
Right.
Yeah.
You're now putting money back into your own pocket because it's like an investment,
Yeah.
and you're not paying a hedge fund or somebody else to rent from them. So
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's good. So one last thing I hope to talk about is, we talked about the low side of the price range, the high side of the price range. Like what's the intricacies of that we've seen, like with jumbo loans and new homes being normally 700 or more.
Sure. Lead the way.
Sure. Elliot, so you've been really tracking the new constructions. So I know we have like our D.R. Hortons and like kind of our large quantity builders, maybe would be a way to classify them. And then you have kind of everybody else. So like, what have you been seeing as far as the trending of prices as we kind of in the perspective of like different sectors have different trends?
I mean, prices overall for all the homes, everything is up right now. However, once you get into the higher price market, million plus, the market's moving slower. It's acting, in my opinion, more like a normal, balanced market.
Okay.
Also, to get on the loan side of it, with jumbo loans, because jumbo loan is anything over 642, 648, something like that. The interest rates are actually lower. So, if you're kind of in that range, and you're close to that jumbo loan, it might behoove you to go ahead and spend a little more money to get the lower interest rate and actually have a lower payment for a larger house. And again, that market, kind of that 650, 700, is a little bit less of a feeding frenzy. And you could be close to the city, if that's what you want. You could be in that new construction. A lot of new construction is at 650, 750, on up to up from there. But it's definitely that has become kind of the middle ground for the market. Is that kind of 700 range. So
it is interesting. I don't know if I would ever saw the day where I said like, oh yeah, an average house is 650, 700. But it's like, I mean, at least around here, that's the reality. It's, like, we're talking about stories. One of the house like literally behind mine, $700,000, and they're pretty similar. The only difference they have than us is they have a fire pit and like an 800 square foot basement. That's kind of just like a large finished room. I don't think there's substantial differences. So meter that a little bit, but like I did not spend $700,000 on my house. I spent less than half of that. So it's like I'm kind of like, oh wow, and that brings me to the question of what about we're talking about doing the things that are wise or affordable. We have so many people who want to sell because they think they're sitting on a gold mine. I don't think that's an inaccurate statement, but is that like a great motivating factor to, let me get this money out while the getting's good, versus the market, the comps are there. Like you're this people that sell. I have the comp for that house now that I didn't have last year if I went to go sell. So it's like
I think that the trend is that people aren't putting those on the market. They're just pulling the money out and doing something with the house. And so that's another reason that's kind of hurting inventory. So people people certainly appreciate the value going up, but one thing is, it is kind of all relative. So unless you're going to move further from town or downsize, the increase in value it's all relative. Everybody around you, if you want to buy a bigger house, you want to upgrade, you're going to be upgrading way up, price wise. So what's hurting inventory is people are saying, hey, I've got all this equity, I want a nicer house. Well, shoot, rather than go through all the pain points of moving, I'll just take a little loan out on here and just do the improvements to my current home.
Yeah.
And I think we see that more at the higher price points, because that's where you can get 50, 100,000 out of equity out and then just do something there.
Sure.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm seeing on the inventory side. However, there's no price point that is immune to the current conditions. So if it's a $300,000 house or $800,000 house, if they're in a good area, they're all hard to get.
Yeah, and they're going to continue to grow in cost and value. Yeah, that's good. So I think I think we've talked about this. Johnny has a client like this, but people that are like selling their house, they're taking the money, and maybe a lot of times it's out of a good desire to have we've always wanted to build a home, so now we're going to build a home. So we're going to cash out and we're going to live with my parents, or we're going to live in a mobile home or a trailer. Mobile home's probably the most appropriate application of the situation. But people literally are worried that I feel like the sentiment is, if I don't sell now, I'm never going to get this money that I just got. So it's like, when I look at it from a stock market perspective, you don't lose anything until you sell it.
Right.
You don't gain anything till you sell it technically, but on paper you still have the value.
Right.
So it's like those are the deeper questions. Why? Is this a money grab? Because if you go live in a mobile home with your wife that's used to a $1 million house, are you still going to have a wife in 3 months or 6 months because of the pressures and the constraints and all that kind of stuff? Is this might be a good financial move, but is this a good life move?
Right.
And then for us, it's I think that's the challenge, and this is the part that I actually love to do, is let's solve for this. We have $400,000 in equity. You've always wanted to build your house. How do we make that happen? There's ways to make that happen. We could get a construction, a perm loan, buy land, get a builder to build it, have plenty of time for that builder to build it, given supply constraints and given delays that will inevitably happen. And then you go back and sell your house after the fact. And also that house is probably going to appreciate some in that waiting.
Right.
If we can solve for that for people, that's a win-win for everybody. It's I would love to say, I'm going to sell my $700,000 house, but I'm going to do it in a year when it's 10%, when I'm going to get 10% more for it, for the other $70,000, and my lot was 50, so I'm up 20.
Right.
Those are the situations I want to put our clients in.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that's those solutions take all this stuff into account, and that's kind of the analytics we have to constantly run. And this conversation is kind of around the market crashing, but or not, but it's taking all that into account in our advisory role.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's our job. We do it like it's our job.
Then when we are here to serve you. So.